The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is in Israel in the wake of attacks on Qatar last week, and as the IDF intensifies its strikes on Gaza.
The top U.S. diplomat is in the region to gain insights on the future of the conflict, as well as how to secure release of the remaining hostages in the enclave. At the same time, Arab and Islamic leaders have convened in Qatar for an emergency summit to coordinate a response to Israel's deadly attack on Doha last week, targeting Hamas officials. Qatar's Prime Minister has urged the international community to stop using what he called double standards and hold Israel accountable.
For the very latest, let's speak now to Amin Saikal. He's adjunct senior fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Dr. Saikal, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning, and good morning. I want to start by asking you about Marco Rubio's visit. Is there any other way to interpret his visit other than complete support for the United States despite that attack on Doha less than a week ago?
I think this is the right interpretation, and I think if you're sitting in Doha and looking at the Secretary Rubio appearing with Prime Minister Netanyahu on the Wailing Wall and reaffirming America's alliance with Israel, then I think you would get a very distressing message. Because I think what the Qataris really want is at least an even-handed policy approach on the part of the Trump administration, but I don't think that is really coming their way. And at the same time, it's very clear that Rubio is not really doing anything which could possibly prevent Prime Minister Netanyahu to proceed with its plan of ethnic cleansing Gaza and, of course, eventually formally annexing Gaza and also possibly move into the West Bank.
The Secretary of State is scheduled to officially meet the Israeli Prime Minister later today. My understanding is that they won't talk so much anymore about the airstrike in Doha, but more about the border war with Hamas and also potential West Bank annexation. I mean, is it fair to say that both sides are already moving on? And I guess, you mentioned Arab nations. There is that fear that they will be next. Are they now perhaps a bit more reassured that Benjamin Netanyahu isn't going to go after Hamas leaders who might be meeting or taking refuge in their countries?
Well, I think one message that Secretary Rubio may convey to Prime Minister Netanyahu is that Israel should not attack Doha again, or for that matter, any other Arab capital, simply because that causes too much hiccup in United States relationship with some of the friendly Arab countries who have been a very lucrative source of investment as well as trade with the United States. And we know that President Trump is essentially a transactional leader, and he is very much interested in maintaining these lucrative relationship with particularly oil-rich states in the region. But at the same time, of course, the United States is once again made it very clear that it stands by Israel in terms of its operations in Gaza. And my hunch at this point is that I think that Trump administration is quite willing to support the annexation of Gaza, and at the same time, probably, or perhaps a bit later, Prime Minister Netanyahu declaring jurisdictions over all the settlements in the West Bank, and eventually also declaring the annexation of the West Bank. And this really comes ahead of the United Nations General Assembly meeting, where a number of allies of the United States and friends of Israel are going to declare their full support or recognition of the state of Palestine. And I think this reassurance, American reassurance to Netanyahu, is that don't worry about what is going to would be forthcoming. And of course, Australia is one of the countries which has said that it's going to declare its recognition of the Palestinian state. So this trip by Secretary Rubio, I doubt it very seriously that's going to really calm down the situation, except that it is going to provide more ammunition for those people who are totally opposed to what Israel is really doing in Gaza and also doing in the region as a whole.
Okay, Dr. Saikal, there seems to be mixed expectations surrounding the upcoming Arab-Islamic summit. What would a realistically unified and forceful Gulf or regional response to Israel's strike actually look like?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. But at this point, I understand, or my feeling is that probably they will issue a very strong diplomatic support for the state of Qatar, and also a very clear warning to Israel not to continue its operations, whether it is in the occupied Palestinian territories or, for that matter, any of the Arab countries. Egypt has already said that if Israel attacks any Hamas members in Egypt, that is a red line, and therefore Egypt will retaliate. But of course, the Arab countries are, in the past, have been divided. The relations between some of the Arab countries and Qatar has not been very good, although it has improved substantially in the last few years. But there are a number of Muslim countries which will be very strongly supporting Qatar along some of the Arab countries. But at the same time, they will be really demanding the implementation of the two-state solution. And of course, Pakistan, as a Muslim country, Malaysia as a predominantly Muslim country, they will be, and of course Turkey, they do not necessarily regard Hamas as a terrorist organization, but as part of the Palestinian nationalist movement for independence and freedom.
Okay, Doctor, ahead of the summit, we heard from Qatar's Prime Minister saying the country's mediation efforts will continue. What do you think is driving Doha's commitment, and how effective can it remain as a channel for ceasefire?
I don't think it's going to be terribly effective from this point, as it hasn't been for a long time, simply because that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his extremist ministers are absolutely set to continue with their operations in Gaza and, of course, in the West Bank. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, in the recent weeks, have alluded to the concept of the Great Israel. And to me, it appears that probably is halfway through achieving that, because it's not only a question of annexation of Gaza and the possibility of the West Bank, but Israel has already occupied part of southern Lebanon as well as part of southern Syria, behind the occupied Golan Heights. And to me, this is all really part of this concept of Greater Israel. And that is what I think is very alarming, not only to the Palestinians, but also to the Arab countries in the region as a whole, and of course for the international community. But Israel can ignore all that, as it has done so far, because of the full support and unqualified support that it has had from Washington.
Right. Dr. Saikal, does it also follow, and I want to focus specifically on Israel's assault on Gaza City right now, that neither of the two meetings, the big ones anyway, Rubio with Netanyahu and the Arab Summit, is going to make any difference, as far as that assault into Gaza City is concerned?
Well, I think the only way that Secretary Rubio could make a difference is to convey a very strong message to Prime Minister Netanyahu that if it does not stop the Gaza operations and the ethnic cleansing and the starvation and all that, then the United States will cut off its military aid to Israel. But I doubt it very seriously that he's going to do that, and as a result, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to remain unhinged and continue to proceed with his plan of total annexation of Gaza.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for your time today. That was Amin Saikal, Adjunct Senior Fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies at NTU.